lobby. Lobby for lobby gobblers. Here.
Oh, part 2 of the day. We're going to have a wander around the Lancashire Mining Museum now, Astley Green.
Now, how many remember the old mining museum at Salford at Buell Hill Park? That closed about the year 2000, and that was a brilliant museum as far as Rosendale was concerned, because they actually had part of the endless chain haulage Ginny End from Old Meadows Colliery and Bacup. They made a surface display out of it. I wonder what happened to that. But anyway, sadly, that museum, well, it ran from about 1957 to the year 2000, when the council decided that they weren't going to fund it anymore. They had better things to fund, apparently. Pardon me. Also, the house itself was a really interesting place. I think it dated from about 1827, and it was owned or built at that time by the guy that owned the Manchester Guardian. And another thing about that house, Frances Hodgson Burnett, her of the Secret Garden fame, well, she wrote part of that book when she used to go and visit the house. So anyway, Astley Green is now Lancashire Mining Museum. And sadly, Lancashire, like the mining industry, is shrinking, isn't it? Part of it's Greater Manchester, or it's Merseyside, Cumbria's taken part of it, and also Cheshire has. So perhaps that's why the mining industry doesn't get as much historical coverage in Lancashire, like the Yorkshire coalfield and the Great North Eastern coalfield, because everybody's got their own thing to push now, haven't they? But anyway, I really recommend that you go to Astley Green. It's a fantastic place, and if it doesn't have the same facilities as perhaps the National Mining Museum at Cap House, the enthusiasm of all the guides, it brims over, and their enthusiasm, really, it's fantastic. But then again, Lancashire folk, we're Gradely folk, aren't we?
Now, Astley Green itself, it's very distinctive, isn't it, with that headgears. That headgear's over 98 feet high, and it was built by a firm, or constructed by a firm in Stockton-on-Tees, all made out of wrought iron. Now, the pit itself was owned by the Clifton and Kearsley Coal Company, although at Astley they operated as a Pilkington Coal Company. That way, if one of the pits kind of went sideways, it didn't affect the rest of the group. It was a very old company as well, owned by the Fletchers. Well, the Fletchers were something to do with it. I'm not that well up on my Manchester pits. And they also had owned pits in the Irwell Valley. That's mainly where they were based. Wet Earth, most people have heard of Wet Earth, the Clifton Colliery, and Outwood going out towards Bury. They were also owned by the same company, amongst others. But they were running out of reserves at the time, so the Astley Green pit was sunk to access reserves on the South Manchester. In fact, it was the southernmost of the Manchester pits, and it was sunk over 890 yards down to the Trenchardbourne mine to access coal under Chat Moss. And most of you have heard of Chat Moss, haven't you? From the Liverpool-Manchester Railway. Well, that's where the reserves lay, under Chat Moss. And they dipped at an angle of 1 in 4, so they were laid quite steep. And you can well imagine at that depth, it was red hot down there.
Oh, it's there now. Sorry, Scott. He said it wrong.
I remember when they did Sam in Astley Village.
Yeah.
It's
A gin pit.
It's a pity you can't get hold of that on video, innit,
You
Sam?
can't you?
You maybe can't. I've never seen it like
You've
it.
got a gin pit. Show you Gin Pit Village.
Have you not seen, it's the nice little thing they got like that wheel there, that's
Yeah,
it's a shame really.
I'll take him there as well.
Because that's why we're fighting so hard to save that headgear.
I know.
It's last bit head we've got in Lancashire. The engine on it, if you've been on its engine.
I have a while ago.
Have you seen it run?
Not seen it run.
Oh, you're joking now.
No, I'm not. I might have done last time I come, but I'm going back a while.
Oh. Is it on there? No. Is there any in that black bag?
Hey,
Didn't you?
heat the tea up, man. Don't leave that. There's kids would be glad of that.
Didn't you we were coming,
That's
Clive?
lobby. Lobby for lobby gobblers. Here, I'm straight in front of you.
Oh, is it one of them?
Oh, right, much easier, lad. Turn the end. Let's have a look at this.
Oh, hey, don't think you're getting away with it, lad. Come here.
Get away, no.
Yeah. Go on.
cottagers worth down there.
Yeah.
Right, where are you? Come here.
love.
Put that on.
Right, cock, stick that on the head. And that's rolled the sleeves up for those I've done some work.
Spin. I thought I'd done some work.
I say, look at the lad.
My dad worked at Plonk Lawn Pitmen.
Plonk
Did
Lawn.
you? Plonk Lawn.
Oh no, penny to wharf, do you know? There we are, so the price of houses have gone quite high. It's penny to wharf
Oh,
now,
no,
dear.
flipping heck.
Got a
Aye.
muffler and all, eh?
Oh, yeah.
Not Plonk Lawn, no moor.
No. I brought up there Plonk Lawn.
Oh, you way back?
Yeah.
Common lane.
Oh, yeah.
How's IFO?
Yeah, I might
Oh,
have
yeah,
taken
that's
that.
really-
Scented City.
Shintin.
Well, let's
What did it tell you?
Yeah, you
What
see?
did it tell you? You've no choice.
Calvin
What?
Klein got out on us.
No, we had one of them baths as a kid.
Yeah?
Yeah, I used to have
Hey,
a bath in
I
there.
did. I have to volunteer for Friday night. Somebody will scrub the back for the
That's it. I
It's a
really
lovely
like
did I?
it. Yeah,
Hey,
I
that's
really
not been
like it.
upstairs yet, lad.
No,
Now
no,
see,
no.
she can't stop her, can you?
No, you
She's
can't.
good, you know,
No.
she's
Absolutely not. Sit.
Sit you down here, lads. Well, no, sit over here and get you all together.
No, you go on the over there.
Who's fittest?
In.
Oh, I can get Royce then.
So your husband were to do with all,
Yeah.
all his family?
My husband has said we've done his family tree and we've gone back to
But when you get older, you
1620.
get your glasses on. Try
And
pretty
they were
close to
all
see
miners,
black and white
and so
dead old-fashioned.
Stuart is the
Oh,
last
okay,
miner
yeah.
because all
Yeah,
the
good
coal
idea,
mines have closed.
Black and white. would be
And
good,
both
wouldn't
his
it?
grandfathers
Yeah,
were
quite
killed
good,
underground.
actually.
One down Clockface Colliery when a 7-foot by 3-foot piece of coal fell out of and broke his back. He survived for 3 months later, but unfortunately died from his injuries. And his maternal grandfather, he was killed in the Second Battle of the Somme in March 1918 as a tunneller, because the South Lancashire Regiment, there were a lot of miners and things like
went
that, and
tunneling,
obviously kept all the trenches up and wherever. And unfortunately, Harry got killed 2 days after Stuart's mother was born, leaving 4 babies behind.
Oh.
And the one who died down Clockface Colliery, which was his dad's dad, he died, I say, 3 or 4 months after his injuries, and within a week had to leave
What's your name?
the house that they lived in
Carol.
because it was a colliery
I was
house.
going Carol.
My granddad was at Battleloose. That was done
Oh,
round
yeah.
the pits, you
That's-
know?
Yeah.
Yeah, he laid for 5 hours out in no man's land.
Yeah, well, Harry was never found. He
No.
just was there 1 minute
Good
and
bang,
gone the next.
yeah.
He's
Yeah.
died,
So he's not
that's
got a grave. He's just in Poitiers in France.
We go back to the 1600s, you've traced them back. That's brilliant.
1620.
Yeah. And that round this neck of the woods.
No, they start off in the Midlands.
Oh, right.
They were all in the swaddling coats. And then in about 19... let me think of this. Around about 1904, 1906, his great-grandfather, together with his 7 sons, walked from the Midlands to St Helens because that's where the work was.
Yeah.
So that's how, and then they all went down St Helens pits, etc. But when the war broke out in 1914, Harry actually joined up. He didn't have to because it was a reserved occupation, but he did. And I say he survived till March 1918, but like 12 months, 9 months before, obviously, he'd been injured and gone home, and then his mum was conceived, but so when he died on the 22nd of March, he didn't know that he got a little girl at all.
Oh,
Well, Stuart we were on strike, 84, 85, and he drove the picket bus. So he's got so many stories to say about the miners' strike.
Oh, you love you.
He really has. He's got some very, very good reports. I mean, everybody has different views on the strike and everything, but we
Carol?
had nothing.
Tell me
Yeah.
your
We just
stuff on.
had nothing for 12 months, and we believed in it,
Yeah.
everything like that.
Yeah.
And as I say, because he drove the picket all around the country, etc., he's got some real good stories to tell.
Well, it's good, isn't it, Claire?
You like this when you grew up, Dave?
I mean, this reminds me of my grandma's. My grandma's was down Tunnicliff, so
Overcoat sort of bed, eh?
Yeah.
And when we started at Apton Valley, we used to get a coalboard van every day to Old Boston and then to St Helens Tech. And the guy that used to drive us home, I think it was Sammy, who used to take us in the morning, and our coming home driver was a bloke called Joe. I forget his last name, but I think Joe had been a blacksmith before he started driving the van. And Joe's claim to fame, as he always told us, was that he once fell off those headgears. They are magnificent, aren't they? And from those, we go across to Fred's. There's Fred Dibner's headgear.
My replica will have all of these three things. The only difference is we won't be digging any coal because that's not allowed.
Hi, my name is Stewart. I did 22 years underground as a coal miner. I've done my family tree to 1620. I am the last coal miner in my family. That's me, young man, as a coal miner.
Complete with the black eyes, eh?
Even with the black eyes, that's the reason I show that photograph, to show the young ones that it was coal dust and nothing else more but coal dust.
Yeah.
And I think young ladies get tattooed nowadays. When I was a young man growing up, I could hear my dad say to his friends, "That lad of mine, he'll never work in pit." And when I was growing up, my dad used to say to me, "My dad is buried somewhere over there."
Get your phone if you're hungry. Do it.
He said he's buried somewhere over there. He was actually miles off. Just before the pandemic, I found my grandfather's grave.
Yeah?
He'd been buried as in a pauper's grave. And here we have a lamp room. Every pit had a lamp room. This is a mock-up of a lamp room. Bold colliery, 1800 men, 1800 lamps, 1800 rescuers, 1800 tallies. My number, Bold colliery, was 624. The lamp, 624. The rescuer, 624. These numbers there, for one reason: if you get killed in an explosion, or you're lost, or you've got to crush you, we know 624 is still on the ground. Self-rescuer, only introduced in 1967, as late as 1967, a self-rescuer. I wore one of those for 2 hours. Why 2 hours when it's only got 20 minutes for the lifespan? Because you're only allowed to take it off when instructed. Simple as that. You only take it out when you're instructed. If I'm in a fire or an explosion and my mate goes down, the first thing I do is take this off my own belt, put that in my mouth, put that over my nose, put that over my head. I then go down, I will take my mate's off his belt, and I will do exactly the same, and then I'll leave him where he is. When there's another explosion or another fire coming this way, there's nothing I can do about that. I have to leave it there, because within 2 minutes or so, I'll be on the floor outside of it. Trust me, after wearing one of these for 2 minutes, you just want to take it out because your lungs are on fire. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. But it's a lifesaver. It's not allowed underground without self-rescue. Leave the lamp room that morning. Every morning, the pits that I worked at, or at least 2 pits, there used to be a 7-foot Grim Reaper stood outside. I'm lucky for you this morning. But before I go any further like this, you said, well, I didn't end up in pit, and my dad didn't want me working pit. But it was simple. When I was 18, and my wife was on site at the moment, she was my girlfriend, I got sacked for starting a union. I was 18, I got sacked for starting a union. My wife said to me, "Stuart, what are you going to do? What are you going to do for a job? What are you going to do?" "Oh, if I get a job in pit." She, "What's your dad going to say?" So I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. Sunday morning, after a week, 2 weeks later, I get the job, and it's asking my mum, Sunday night, 10 o'clock. "Dad, I started a new job in the morning." I said, "Why, lad, where's it going?" I said, "I'm going in pit." And when I tell you the slates on our house lifted, trust me, they did. And my dad stood up and he said, you in a pit, yeah, I'll tell you now, you won't last 5 minutes in a pit, lad. I'm telling you, you'll not last 5 minutes. And I'll tell you people, I wasn't scared. First 2 years, I wasn't scared. I was petrified. I could have given that job a million times, but I agree with Dad. It won't last 5 minutes.
I want to feel the weight of these things. More time. It'll come to me in a minute.
Yeah.
I'll come back to you with that.
Yeah, you'll go round corner and remember it, won't you?
I've never been there.
Hey, there's a little crab there. Little air winch, is like what we used to have at Grime Bridge. Well, it does look like they're trying to get a bit of a training gallery here, like Old Boston. Deep face line, pans up face line, and coming to the stage loader end. Got some fan bagging up there, ventilating the in-by end of the heading. This is obviously trying to, well, I don't know, is it trying to mock up like a coal face with advanced heading? There'd be a stage loader off the end at pans. Mind you, them big pans, bigger than at valleys. Them's more like Apton valleys. When we were just trainees, they sent us to Bold Colliery to do our underground training, 20 days. And the coal seams, coal face would be this high. Behind it, you've got a chock that'd be like from the valley. Ranging drum shearer. Yeah, the disc's been taken off. It's a shame they haven't got this all set up proper, you know, it could be a cracking little display. Obviously they've got ideas of building an horse gin, which would be good to see when it's finished. It looks like they're trying to mock up a coal face. Got the shearer there. Drum's having a bit of trouble. Go through chocks. And you can see it's a double-ended shearer. That's grand, Dave, isn't it? Yeah. They've got this kind of mocked up a little bit like a coal face, but they haven't finished it.
Right.
You look, that's a shearer.
Yeah.
It's a ranging drum, double-ended. Your disc, they've took the disc off.
Right.
There'd be one on that side, one on that, one up a height, one below.
That would cut coal, would it?
Yeah, that cut the coal. That spun and cut the coal, and it was situated on these, and the face conveyor are the panzer.
Right.
And you'd have a chain, 2 chains, 3 chains actually, some at this size, with flight bars. So as the shearer cut the coal, there were a cowl that pushed the cut coal onto the pans, and the chains would then act as a conveyor belt. And as the shearer moved up the face, you see they're in bits. They're just in sections.
Yeah, well, they'd that be, wouldn't they?
Yeah, well, there are hydraulic rams on them.
Right.
So as the shearer cut and advanced by the width of the drum, there'd be a ram from the pans to the chop here. You can see where it went in.
Yeah, yeah.
And you would operate a ram that would then push the pans over. They would snake. And then when the pans were in place, you could pull another lever, and that the ram would retract and pull the chop forward.
Right.
And the whole face line would snake as it went up.
Wow.
This is the sort of size you'd have at Bold and British above Bold, certainly. And that's the size of faces we had at Apton Valley.
Wow. Look at this stuff more. Look at it.
Well, there is, isn't it?
Look at this cutter, isn't it? Well, that's BICC as well. Lister Struts.
That's where you were working, Dave, yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
Is that next to it? Same?
Yeah, that's bobbin shop. Yeah, that'll be ICC this. Calendar's Fire Service.
Now we heard Dave talk there about BICC, and there's some photographs at the bottom of the winding house of BICC. Who is BICC? Well, they're the amalgamation of 2 companies actually. Let me get this right for you. There was Callender's Cable and Construction Company and British Insulated Cables, and they merged to form British Insulated Callender's Cables in 1945. Now, the mining industry has lots of subsidiary industries, and cables for all the electrics is a must, and look, they're specialised cables, and BICC made those cables. So there's not just the mining industry, like the cable company. We had Gullick and Dobson that made all the hydraulic supports. Down in the Team Valley in Gateshead, you had Hewwood. They've still got, you can still see the name Hewwood there on the buildings. There was massive industries associated with the coal industry to build and construct the infrastructure. Even round Astley Green itself, when I worked at the pit, there was Kirkless workshops that did a lot of the repair work, on Walkden Yard, that also did repair work. So when the coal industry went, a lot of these subsidiary industries also died, and people don't think about that. So it'd be interesting to learn a bit more about BICC, and it's interesting to look at them photos. I say Dave worked there a long time, and just like us when we entered the coal industry, believing that we had jobs for life, Dave also believed that he had a job for life at BICC. Now Astley Green itself, it's very distinctive, isn't it, with that headgears. That headgear's over 98 feet high, and it was built by a firm, or constructed by a firm in Stockton-on-Tees, all made out of wrought iron. Now the pit itself was owned by the Clifton and Kearsley Coal Company, although at Astley they operated as a Pilkington Coal Company. That way, if one of the pits kind of went sideways, it didn't affect the rest of the group. It was a very old company as well, owned by the Fletchers. Well, the Fletchers was something to do with it. I'm not that well up on my Manchester pits. And they also had owned pits in the Irwell Valley. That's mainly where they were based. Wet Earth, most people have heard of Wet Earth, the Clifton Colliery, and Outwood going out towards Bury. They were also owned by the same company, amongst others. But they were running out of reserves at the time, so the Astley Green pit was sunk to access reserves on the South Manchester. In fact, it was the southernmost of the Manchester pits, and it was sunk over 890 yards down to the Trenchbone mine to access coal under Chat Moss. And most of you have heard of Chat Moss, haven't you, from the Liverpool-Manchester Railway? Well, that's where the reserves lay, under Chat Moss. And they dipped at an angle of 1 in 4, so they were laid quite steep. And you can well imagine at that depth, it was red hot down there. Now the actual winding depth at number 1 pit was 840 metres. That's no mean depth, that's a long way. And to haul coal up from such a depth, we sometimes don't think about this. Well, you just get in let's just say you just get in a lift, and you don't think of the energy that is needed to get you to the top of the building. We used to do a lot of this at training at college, all reckoning how much force would be needed and what speed a cage could be drawn up a shaft. But if you're hauling coal from 800 and odd metres, you need a big engine, a big powerful engine. And the engine for Astley Green was the biggest in the country, and it was made by Yates and Tom from Blackburn. They'd started off as a very small firm, Yates and Tom. But they built the biggest colliery engine in Britain. Now think, how many times these days are you going to find stamps on anything made in Blackburn? The company of Yates and Tom set off in Blackburn in a little blacksmith shop in 1824. by William Yates, and basically they made stationary steam engines. The company turned into Foster Yates and Tom when Joseph Foster took over the company, and they carried on until they manufactured boilers as well. As I said, 16 Lancashire boilers they provided for Astley Green, and they carried on into the 1970s. Like I said, how many places are you going to go now where you get a Made in Blackburn sticker on it? It makes you two of other steam engine makers, other collieries in Lancashire, Gambleside and so forth, where the winding engines came from Haslingden, Stotts of Haslingden. Were you going to find anything now with made in Haslingden on it? Fantastic machine, isn't it? Sadly, it isn't running today. But the winding engines, and all the engines, certainly in Lancashire, East Lancashire, to do with the Ginny Engines, they were immaculate. Stotts of Haslingden made quite a lot of them as well. But I remember John Davis, when he first started at Grindbridge as a young lad, one of his jobs was looking after the number 2 Ginny engine. And amongst all the muck, all the dust, all the oil, he had a beautiful, pristine engine that was intimately looked after. They really went to town looking after the steam engines. And that's why so many of them still live today. Amazing. And I know modern technology's got its uses, but you can't beat this sort of engineering, can you?
You were doing pit what?
Your man's not doing much, is he?
Neither is it.
How does that strike thee then?
Power all that. Say again? Them 3 levers control all that. Yeah. Wow! That's it. It's just like a cable, foot brake, reverse and handbrake. Okay, onto crump look mine. You see this diamond? This is going to be the position of your cage in the shaft. Should have been tells you where it is now, yeah? Yeah, that's where it'll be in the shaft. There is some coming up to Crumbrook seam. What, all them seams are seams? Coal seams, different coal seams? Yeah. So you just stop and lift there to let some people on, basically? Materials, coal, that full engine with them levers. We'll just wait for the pressure build back up now. In new compressors, new man-made compressors. Yeah. Would they have had to wait steam in olden day? No, just boom, chugger away. So yeah, it'd be constant all the time. It'd be going 10 times as quick as this. Yeah. This week, for men, you wind it at 55 miles. Oh, for coal, sorry, you wind it at 55 miles an hour. For coal, 55. Oh no, 30 miles an hour for men, 55 for coal. You're 30 bang, bang, yeah. 17 feet per second. Wow. So that'll give you a quick idea of how you want it.
My workspace on a coal face. See there, on a coal face. That space, that's your toilet, your canteen, that's your bed, that's your Philadelphia lawyer, and your marriage guidance counsellor. Because if you've got problems with your wife at home, you could sit down with your mates and it would give you advice. Normally it was get shut a bit. 8, 12 hours a day on my coal face. Pretty much the same workspace. I know it's very different, but we're looking through a book. So we'll move on, and that is a tunnel. Pretty much what a tunnel looks like underground. Within 6 months, that tunnel could look like that. It could look like that. Or even like that. And what happened in Durban, when I was at Lancashire Colliery at 5,500 feet deep, I know the coal mines, not just Lancashire Colliery. The roof would come, the weight would come in on the roof, the floor would come up. So you've still got to get supplies and men up and down into the coal face. So as a young man, 6'2" forward, there was a Yorkshire Ripper and I was a Lancashire Ripper.
Yeah.
A Lancashire Ripper, they're my papers. A Lancashire Ripper, my job was to go into there, or there, and make it look like that. Just one of those jobs. You just got up and just did it. People say, well, they say,
It can be done.
easy. You just do it.
Oh, right, okay.
You just do it. It's got to be done.
Yeah.
One job I didn't particularly want to do, roof bolting. One job I didn't really want to do.
Is that you?
That's me as a young man, roof bolter. And he said, Stuart, I want you to go roof bolting. I thought, no, I'm alright, I'll cold face me with my mates, having a laugh, a joke, hacking on, believe it or not. Can't tell you how many times that spun me into coal. I can't tell you how many times it spun me and bruised, got me, really.
Yeah.
It was the best job I ever had when it came out of it. When all the pits shut, I went to the gold mines and diamond mines in South Africa.
Alright, yeah.
Teaching people
Yeah.
how to roof bolt. Pure luck.
Yeah.
Pure luck. Lancashire, 142 degrees it was.
Ooh.
I kid you not, 142 degrees. I went for salt drinks first thing in the ambulance first thing in the morning. I had to put salt in water I used to drink and salt tablets. I had signs from every single day. I had to go to ambulance room for signs from 142 degrees. That's me. Minor strike.
I remember it.
A minor strike. 5th of March. Minor strike. My job was to drive that picket bus throughout the country. And as you can see, that picket bus, quite an old bus. And after about 2 months of the strike, we needed to replace it. So we go to the Derby and Joan Club, because we just heard that the Merseyside police were selling a riot bus, and if you purchase it, you can have it after the minor strike. Them big-hearted bobbies sold it to us. There it is. It was called a battle bus. You like, go in Lancashire,
Yeah.
Lancashire miners.
Yeah.
What was battle bus? It says bull bus. Bull bus. Not only did he sell it to us, they taxed it and filled it full of diesel. True.
Why did they do that?
Because,
They were going,
well, they thought it was going to Devon John Club. That's me driving it.
In 1929, the pit was taken over, as most of them were, with what they called amalgamation. It was a time in the industry when they were looking again at nationalisation, putting nationalisation off, but what they encouraged a lot of colliery companies to do, so that there was investment made in the coal industry, was to amalgamate. And Astley Green then became part of Manchester Collieries. Now in 1939, there was one of the lesser known tragedies of the Lancashire coalfield that occurred at Astley Green, when 5 men, including the colliery manager, were killed. At the time, they'd been fighting a gob fire in the Cronbrook mine, and that had set off explosions, a series of, I believe, a series of small explosions, and 5 men were tragically killed then. The colliery was nationalised, obviously, in 1947, and kind of peak manpower. I think in 1939, when that explosion happened, was about 2,000 men underground, men and boys. And at one time, they were employing at least 500 service workers, including, obviously, your obligatory Lancashire pit top women, aren't you? You know, your Lancashire pit lasses who worked on the screens. Nationalised in 1947, and sadly the pit was closed in 1970. But thankfully those headgears survived, and the Lancashire Mining Museum was started. But there is a fight to keep the headgears standing, so I would encourage everybody to try and support that, keep the museum going. It's a fantastic little museum, it really is. I can't stress how much of a fantastic museum. When we got there, we were welcomed by 3 ladies. There was Sue, Carol and Marilyn, and they take you and dress you up, get you looking like a couple of old pitmen, and then you're free to wander around the pit top, look at the different displays, and as we'll see, we've got another character to meet as well. So I encourage you, go to the Lancashire Mining Museum and support it and get involved.